Hello everyone and welcome to another live Unity training. My name is Mike Geig, and after a year of waiting, it is time for Merry Fragmas 3.0 Finish the Fight. So today what we're going to do is we are going to start laying the foundation for our Merry Fragmas multiplayer first-person shooter tutorial. Now this is going to be covered over 3 days, today, tomorrow, and the day after that, obviously. And each day will be about an hour long, and we're going to build a multiplayer first-person shooter game in Unity, and we're going to kind of build off of the stuff that we've done the last 2 years. So we've done multiplayer first-person shooters, obviously, the year before and the year before that, and instead of just covering all of the same ground, I figured I would quickly go over some of the stuff previously. We'll build on it. You know, I'm not going to leave you out in the cold there. But then we're also going to explore some new things. So let's take a look at kind of what we're going to be doing. And so I have here just sort of not really a super finished version, but just kind of what we're aiming for over the next 3 days. So eventually we're going to have this nice lobby. We're going to have our game here we can join. And then inside the game, we're going to have some UI. We're going to look at bots, right? How we build some bots here. And then, you know, let the bot shoot us a couple times. There we go. And obviously I'm not running this multiplayer right now, but I just wanted to give you an idea of what we're looking at. And we're using new graphical assets, a little bit different from previous. And I'm going to talk about all of that here. Alright, so let me just close this off here. I always forget. So at this point, before I go any further, I do want to mention that after this, during this, whenever, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, holiday cheer, whatever, feel free to message us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter, at Unity3D, at The Ant Ranch, at Matt Mirafish, at Will Goldstone, and at Mike Geig, which is me. Howdy. So, hi. Follow us on Twitter. It's fun. All right. And so what I have here is kind of the assets that we used last year, and you can still use these this year. So this is the Stealth project, just updated for Unity 5 here, and there's the Ethan model, and we could build our game with these assets. It's completely viable. However, something new I'm trying this year as well is I'm trying to use some premium assets as well. Now, I don't want to make the premium assets mandatory, obviously, because some of you just want to use the Stealth stuff. So what I did is I created an asset store list, and the link to that asset store list is in the description of this chat. It'll be in the description on the YouTube videos when they're posted and so on and so forth. But it's just, you can always go into the asset store and search Merry Fragmas 3.0 as well, but I also gave you the list. And in here, we have some free assets and some premium assets. So the stealth assets are the stuff we've used the last 2 years, and you can continue to use those. Other things we're using is the network lobby developed by Unity, as well as the cinematic image effects developed by Unity. And if you want to not use the Ethan model or the stealth assets, you can use the sci-fi space soldier, which is what I'm going to be using. There's also this sci-fi heavy station. That's the environment that I'm going to be using. There's the first-person shooter hangar, which is only $1. Pretty good steal there. Which I won't be using, but it's just another alternative. And then these free Christmas assets for the candy cane and maybe the hats and things like that. Now the Christmas music, I just grabbed this one in here. I don't have a free alternative, but the audio, the Christmas music isn't super necessary, so not really a big deal there. All right, so like I said, you know, you don't have to use the premium assets, but you can, and you can get a pretty awesome look out of it. And but otherwise, you can use the stealth stuff. It'll just look like it has the last couple years. So, you know, just trying new things here. All right, so let's talk about the project that I have here. So this is going to be just where we're starting at. So I like to use a custom layout, especially when working with multiplayer stuff, where I can see like the scene, so I can, you know, see what's happening to all the clients and remotes and things like that, and then the actual game view here. And so what this is that again the sci-fi heavy station made by Dot Team on the asset store, and I just opened up their top-down level version. They have like 3 different layouts. And I just did a couple lighting tweaks and things like that. But otherwise, there's nothing networking about this. It is, you know, just the graphical assets. Other thing I did is I took the entire environment and I put it on this layer called Locked. And then the Layers tab, I locked it. That way, I don't accidentally click on the level, which can get super annoying when I'm trying to click on the player and I accidentally click a panel or something like that. So that's all locked down, so I don't have to worry about that. Now inside this project here, I've already downloaded all those assets. So here's the lobby assets, and the models are all the Christmas things and stuff. So you're not going to watch me download stuff from the asset store because, you know, that's super boring and pretty simple. So we're just going to get going, assuming we can already download assets, which is pretty straightforward. All right, and so I've got my scene over in here, and I want to begin building out the player. And so I'm just going to kind of pick a spot here on the ground and begin. And I'm going to use the first-person character controller. And if you don't know where that is, if I go to Assets, and then I go to Import Package, there should be a Characters package. Now, if you have nothing in here, this is empty, that means that when you installed Unity, you didn't check the standard assets checkbox, and so there's nothing in here. Now, the standard assets can be just gotten from the asset store as well, or you can just rerun the installer and install the standard assets or whatever, but that's where these come from. And I just clicked characters. Now, I've already done that, but if I hadn't, that's where I found it. And then here, it creates a standard assets folder, and inside here is characters, and then the one I'm interested in is the first person character, prefabs, first person controller here. So I'm just gonna click and drag that into my scene, and I'm going to expand the character controller so I can actually see the capsule there, and we'll just place it on the ground there. And this is my player, and so I'll rename it player. Nice and straightforward there. And there's a few things I want to tweak around with this player here. And so, someone is in chat is mentioning that they can't hear anything. If you can't hear anything, you might need to refresh your screen. Obviously, you can't hear me say that, so someone else might have to type it. But that's entirely up to you. Okay, so I have my player here, and since I'm using this character controller, I actually don't need this rigid body. I'm not sure why the rigid body is on there. It doesn't need it at all, and sometimes the rigid body can conflict with the character controller, so I think that's just a remnant there. So we don't need that, so I'm just going to get rid of it. And so, goodbye. And so now that I've gotten rid of that rigid body here, I am going to look at this first-person controller script. This is the script that actually controls my character controller, moves it around, does all that stuff. And again, this is just built into those assets. I haven't modified anything here. And so I'm going to go to the head bob. And the head bob right now, it's a bit too much for my taste, especially because we're going to be aiming and things like that. We really won't want the camera sliding all over the place. And so I'm just going to reduce that down to 0.01. It's a cosmetic change, but I still feel like it makes it much better. So I'm just going to remove that or reduce that down there. And so that's really all I need to do with the first-person controller script. I try not to edit these too much, simply because, you know, things on them might change or whatever. And what the big problem that happened last year is I made this where I made modifications to these standard assets, and then like a week later, they updated them, which broke all of my changes, which made the videos pretty much obsolete right off the bat. And we had to have all these addendums written in the forums about how to now fix it so it works again. So this year I've learned my lesson. I'm not modifying these scripts or anything like that. Everything I'm going to build is going to be built on top of that, which may cause us to have to do a little extra work, but if it makes the videos last a lot longer, that's preferable for me. All right, and so now this character controller will allow me to move around and interact in a way, but I also will eventually need to be able to shoot against the player or shoot other players. So I'm going to need a collider. So I'm going to go to Add Component Physics and then Capsule Collider here. And now the Capsule Collider is just going to be kind of small. And what I want to do is I want to make it the same dimensions as my character controller. So I can see 0, 0, 0 there, so the same here. Radius 5.5, radius 0.5, height 1.8, so height 1.8. There we go, just making it match up, and now I can just hide it there. And lastly, for now anyway, I want to be able to see my player, and for now, my player is going to be very simple. So I'm just going to right-click on the player here in the hierarchy, and I'm going to add a capsule. And the capsule is going to be a little too big, so I'm just going to scale down to 0.9. This is my simple graphics until later when we add in the models for the soldier or whatever. And since this capsule has its own collider, I'm just going to remove that. Don't need it. Okay. So there we go. So this is going to be our player for now. And I want to save this. I'll go to my prefabs folder. And I'm just going to click and drag player from the hierarchy down here. And that's going to turn it into a prefab. And so this will be my player from here on out. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and save my scene as. All right. So I like to keep my clean level layout so I can always go back to it if I want. So this scene, based on level layout, I'm going to call main gameplay. All right, cleverly named because it's going to contain my main gameplay. Let me just check chat here. Oh, someone just got audio. Fantastic. Oh, someone asked what version of Unity this is. This is Unity 5.5.0 F3. So there you go. It should work in 5.4. That's what I initially built it in and then updated it. So that should be fine. Alrighty. Someone said they're hearing an echoey voice. Chances are you have the window open twice, or you have like the Unity websites version and Twitch open, so you're hearing it twice or something like that. Maybe you need to mute one version or whatever. That's usually what causes the echo. All right. So right now we have this player, and this is, a non-networked game. I can run around in here. I'm getting some messages about having 2 audio listeners, and it doesn't like that and whatever. But we'll worry about that later. So let's go ahead and turn this into a networked game here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a new object. So hierarchy create empty, and I'm going to call this network manager. And it's going to manage my network, surprise. And I'm going to add a couple components to it. So I'm going to click Add Component, Network, and I'm going to click on Network Manager. Now this is everything that's going to set up and maintain a networked game for me automatically. It's pretty awesome. And in order to interact with it to start with, because you generally interact with it through script, during prototyping and things like that, I'm also going to add Network Manager HUD. Now the Network Manager HUD is a really simplistic UI or old style UI. This should never actually be used in a production game. It's really for prototyping and things like that. And you should always add your own UI or whatever. And I'm going to show you some cool samples to get you started. All right. And so we've got all this here. And now I want to talk about the network manager a bit. So we've got things like don't destroy on load. It doesn't matter if this is on or off right now because I'm not changing scenes. Eventually we're going to have a lobby, and the lobby will change scenes and stuff, and then that's going to become important. But for now I don't care. Run in background is useful because if I turn that off and I minimize my game or I focus a different window, it's going to stop transmitting network activity, and that's going to kick me off. So I don't want to do that. So chances are I'm going to want this checked. I can choose different online or offline scenes. I'm going to leave that. Network info is where we can define our local host, what ports we're listening on, delays, packets, matchmaking ports, matchmaking servers, things like that. I'm going to leave all that alone. We have our spawn info. I'll come back to that. And then one of the cool things I really like, so we have advanced configuration. I generally don't touch that. But the network simulator. So one of the things that happens a lot is people will test their game in a sterile environment in their labs or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, it works great, and we're having a lot of fun or whatever. And then they release it in the wild, in a less than perfect scenario, and it's performing poorly. And the reason is, generally in a sterile environment, especially if I'm just doing LAN on my own system, I don't have packet loss or ton of latency or whatever. So we could always simulate packet loss or latency. Let's say we simulate 400 millisecond latency with 20% packet loss, a really bad network, and let's see how our game performs then, right? Now I'm going to turn this off for now, but it's just great for practicing and testing and kind of simulating a less than optimal network. All right, so those are the things that I really care about right now. And so what I'm going to do next, you know what? So the echo is my fault because I have Twitch open on the side here and I didn't mute it, and you're hearing it through my system. So I apologize, everyone, and in the video recording of this, everyone's going to hear an echo up until this point because there's probably nothing I can do about it. I'll see what I can do about it. Yeah, it's been a full year since I streamed, so I'm going to be a little rusty. I do apologize for that. Alrighty. So on my network manager, it's all good to go for, a networked game. If I hit play, I'm going to see my network stuff here. But I'm going to get an error if I try to, host a game or whatever. It's not going to do anything. And the reason is, and it kind of gets lost here in the console, the reason is that I haven't never specified who my player is. What is my player, right? And so it's not going to be able to start a game because it wants to auto create a player because I don't have any scripts to do anything else, and it doesn't know what the player is. Now I'm going to click and drag my player prefab into the player prefab property here, but it's not going to go. All right, and instead I'm going to we'll deal with these messages later. I'm going to get this error, hey, there's no network identity. I've not identified this player as something that can exist on a network. And so all things that exist on the network have to have a network identity. It's what enables them for multiplayer. And so now I'm going to go add component on the player, network, and then network identity. There we go. And that's all I'm going to need to do. I'll hit apply. That'll save it to my prefab here. And on the network manager, I'm just going to click and drag the player there. And so now it says, okay, this is my player. All right, so it knows that I have this player. And so now I'm going to go ahead and save my scene and hit play. And I'm going to host a game here. And there I am. And so I noticed a couple odd things right off the bat. Okay, and so first off, I'm moving both of these capsules. And why do I have two capsules? Also, I can't look up and down. For some reason, I am just unable to look up and down. And so here's what's happening. So one of these players was the one that was just in the scene, right? It's just already there. And then this player, this is me. I'm the player object, right? I was spawned into this game. It's a multiplayer game. And so for some reason, I'm controlling both of these. And the reason is both of these have a script on it that says, hey, when you push a button, right, move forward. And so both of these, both me and the not me player, are seeing that moving forward. Also, if you're wondering why I can't look up and down, what's interesting is that if I look at my main camera, the camera that was in my scene, when I look up and down, you'll see that it's moving up and down, not my first person camera. All right? And so what's effectively happening here is the way the first person controller works out of the standard assets is it looks for this camera that's underneath of it, but it looks for it by looking for the main camera. And that's problematic because our scene already has a main camera. And so we're going to need to kind of work around that. Again, I don't want to modify that script in any way because that's going to be invalidated if things ever get updated. And so I'm just going to, work around it. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead to my camera that's in my scene, and for now, I'm just going to change it to untagged. All right? That won't be a problem here in the future. We'll switch it back, but for now, I'm going to make it untagged. Now, that's not going to actually fix my problem, really, because I'm back in my scene, and again, I can't look up and down. And why? Because we have this other player, the one that was just in our scene before, and now it's the one that's looking up and down. They both found the one that's not me. And so, again, we're going to have to deal with that, and that's kind of a big part of that, right? And so we're going to fix that here in just a moment. That's kind of the first kind of step to understanding networking, is the understanding that it's the whole multiplicity or duplicity or whatever you want to call it, where there are many versions of me, and there's the local me, and then there's all the remote me's, and then there's the local me's that aren't me, right? And so that gets kind of weird because this player here is local sort of to this machine, but it's not a local player because the one that spawns in as me, the one associated with my connection, that's the local player. And so I need a way of controlling all the versions of player 1 and all the versions of player 2 and so on and so forth. It can kind of bake your noodle a little bit, but if you think about it, if you have 4 players in a match, you have 16 players, because on person 1's computer, there's player 1, 2, 3, and 4. On person 2's computer, there's player 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, right? And so it's about figuring out who's the local one, who represents me, and then who's the remote ones that are all the other players that are just remotes on my machine. And so we're going to start figuring all that stuff out. Now, the position that I spawn at, just here in the corner, that's just some arbitrary position. The machine doesn't actually know where to put me. The server doesn't know where to put me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spawn point so that it knows where I should be. And so I'm going to go to my hierarchy again, and I'm going to create an empty here. And I'm going to just name this spawn point. For the person who just asked if I read chat, I do read chat. Howdy. And so I'm just going to call this spawn point, and so that I can more easily place it, I'm going to give it an icon here. And I'll just kind of push it down until it's close to the ground, right about there. And I'll rotate it so it's going to be looking just inward. Cool. And so to turn this into a spawn point is actually really simple. I'm just going to go add component, network, and then network start position. There's nothing I need to do to it. Now this is a spawn point. And I'll duplicate it because eventually I'm going to have 2 players here. I could have 2 players right now, but it would look really weird because they'd all just be fighting again, just like we're already seeing. So I'm not going to do that yet. But now I have 2 spawn points. Now one of the things I want to kind of avoid for now is that what would happen if both players spawned at the same spawn point at the same time. Now we're not really using a rigid body right now. It's actually quite hilarious when we are, because when we are using a rigid body, if they spawn at the same point, one of them gets like shot into the stratosphere. But since we're not using rigid body, generally people just get sort of pushed out of the way. Either way though, I'm going to kind of prevent that from happening. So I'm going to go to my network manager. And under the spawn info, I'm just going to change my spawn method from random, which could cause them to both spawn at the same point, to round robin. So they'll take turns. So if I have 2 players, 2 spawn points, each one will get their own spawn point. And that'll be much more copacetic there. So now, if I hit play, and I hit host, now I'm spawning at one of my spawn points. All right, and so that is going to work out a lot better there. Okay. Now, I can build this right now just so we can see what this is kind of doing with multiplayer. It is a fully multiplayer game now. It's not only multiplayer in the sense of local area network. I can go out on the internet with this. It's not a very good multiplayer game. There's a lot of bugs and issues, and you can't really control your player all that well. But yeah, we can play this on a multiplayer, on the network or on the internet. So let's go ahead and check it out. So one of the things I have done already, just to streamline this process, is if you go to Edit, Project Settings, and then Player, one of the things I did is, first off, I don't want this to be full screen. And I set it to a low resolution. That way I can have both screens on my monitor at once. I've also disabled or hidden the display resolution dialog. That way it doesn't pop up every time I build it. Instead, it's just going to go right into the game. So those are some things that just sort of make my life a little bit easier. So I'm going to do Control B to kick off a build here. And it's going to build. The first build takes a little bit longer than subsequent ones. So it's built. It's starting up over here. And I'm also going to run it here. And so here, I'm going to be the host. Okay. And then over here, I'm going to be the client. And so as the client, I can see here on my host, I now have the 3 players. The one that's just already in my scene sitting there. If I'm here, yep, that would be the client over there, and that's me, the host, over here. So player 1, player 2, or however you want to view that. And if I start moving, again, all of them move, right, which is problematic. Okay, but also notice that I don't see them move up here. They're not moving. I'm only seeing them local to this client moving, right? And same if I come over here, you know, now they're moving here on this machine, but I'm not seeing that on my client, right? So I'm not sharing the information of what's happening. I'm only sharing the fact that they have spawned, and that was it. And so I need to share that information, and I also need to stop them all from doing the same thing. They're basically copying me, and that's really annoying. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the client, stop the server here, and I want to fix all that nonsense. All right. So here's the point where I could crack into this first-person controller script and say, hey, only the local player gets to do these things, and only the local player has this, and only the local player does that, and only the remotes have this. But I don't want to modify this script. It bit me before, all right, because, you know, if these things ever change, then this video has become outdated, invalid, right? It would be very easy to just drop a script in here, but I'm actually going to show you what I view to be an even easier solution, okay? So what we're going to do is we're not going to modify any of these assets. Everything that we're going to modify will be new stuff, okay? And I'm going to give you all the scripts and all that stuff, so all that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, like I said, build on top of that here. I'm going to go to my scripts folder, and I am going to go ahead and right-click, create a new C# script named player. Now the player script is going to be responsible for the networked entity that is my player. It's going to be the root control of pretty much everything. And I kind of want to route most stuff that I can through player. Now obviously we're going to have some specialized scripts like the shooting script and health script, but all of those in a way will play into this player script. So this is going to be a very important script for us. I'm just checking chat here. I see a lot of messages here. Someone said, will this be on YouTube? It will be on YouTube. Yes, these will all get posted. We're 26 minutes in, so yeah. Merry Fragmas, y'all, indeed. Someone asking about Photon. I actually have no idea about that. Well, I mean, I've used it before, but I don't know about its like current structure or whatever. It's been a while. And so, okay, that appears to be about it. All right, so we have this player script. And so what the player script is going to do first, before we start adding other stuff to it, is it's going to allow us to dictate what belongs to a local player versus what belongs to a remote player versus what belongs to everybody. And so to start things off, I'm going to go to my player here. All right. And first off, this first person character, this is this camera that's giving me all these fits because this is what's preventing me from looking up and down. I'm going to turn that off because only the local player will have one and all of the remotes will not. So I'm just going to start with it off and I'll turn it on for the local player. All right. So that's one of the things. Also, this first person controller script, and I'm not going to modify it, but again, only the local player needs it. All of the remote players do not. So I'm just going to disable it. All right. That way, all of the players that spawn won't be able to move and won't have a camera. And just for the one player, the local player, I'm going to turn them on. And I'll apply those changes there. And so I'm now going to go ahead and edit my player script. Excuse me. Sorry about that. All right. And I'm also going to zoom this in here, because I know it tends to be pretty small to start. All right. And so this is going to be my network script here. So I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of these things. I won't need them. And I'm going to say using Unity engine dot networking, because I'm going to need some networking there. And I'm also going to do using Unity engine dot events. Now normally I'll write code that says turn this on, turn this off, get component, turn this, but I'm going to show you actually a much simpler way that's pretty darn cool. All right, so there's no need to write a bunch of code to clarify this stuff for us, to fix a lot of this stuff. We can actually be much more agile with it by doing something very graphical in nature. All right, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Unity events, which are stored inside the Unity engine.events library here. And so I'm going to say serialize field. Serialize field is like public, but it keeps them private, just makes them viewable in the inspector. And then I'm going to say Unity event. All right, and then I will say let's say on shared enabled. Okay, so I'm just going to do this for now. And let's go back to Unity here. And on my player, I'm going to add this player script. And so now I get this graphical thing where I can add all these things, these events. What do I want to do when a player, or remote or local, is enabled, right? Now I can do that. I can do on shared enabled, on remote enabled, on local enabled, but I can already see sort of a problem. So let's say on shared enabled. So on shared enabled, I'm going to do so what's something we're going to enable for everybody? That was a bad example to start with because we don't have anything just yet. We'll say the capsule for now, whatever. And I could say capsule and then game object set active bool true. But here's the problem. Let's say I've got 4 things in shared, right? That means that I'm going to have on shared enabled and on shared disabled, all 4 of them with a check, the other 4 without a check, and all of a sudden this script is going to become huge inside my inspector, because that's just the shared, then I've got the locals and the remotes, and it would be so much easier if I didn't have to specify a value here. If I could just say, you know, let's just toggle on and off based on some dynamic value, right? And the Unity events can't do that directly, but check this out. So this is where all the money is today. If you didn't know this, you're gonna love today. Sorry about that. I'm trying not to cough, and it's hard. And so I don't want to use a Unity event per se. Instead, I want to build something that is going to be much more dynamic. All right. And so here's what I'm going to do. And someone asked, can we set them in code? You can set them in code. I'm trying to prevent that. And so here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to create a new class real quick right at the top here. So I'm going to say system.serializable. I'm going to create a serializable class. All right. That will be public class. And I'm going to call this a toggle event. That's just the name of my class. And it's going to inherit from Unity event type bool. All right. So I've just basically created a class called toggle event. It is a type of Unity event that is based on a Boolean, true or false. Right? And I could do this with other data types, but I need to toggle, right? I need to turn something on and off, true, false. So I'm going to use a Boolean. And now I'm not going to use Unity event anymore. I'm going to use toggle event. All right? Toggle event. And I will say no longer on shared enabled. I'm going to say on toggle shared. So I want to toggle a shared items. And I'll just have a couple of these. So on toggle shared, on toggled local, and then on toggle remote. Now, I don't have to have 6, I can have 3. And check this out. So now I'll come back here, right? So I've got that, these 3 now. And let's say, let's see something I'm going to use remotely. So on toggle local, for my local player, I'll just click this here. I will drag my first person controller script on there. All right, so first person controller. And now I could say enabled down here under static parameters, but again, I'd have to supply a value. Instead, I could say first-person controller under dynamic Boolean values. It's going to list just the ones that can receive a dynamic Boolean. Enabled. Look, no value. And so now, just by calling this event, I'd no longer have to supply this, and I can reduce the amount of events I need in half, which is going to make things much, much more reusable. All right. see, sorry, I just see a question here in chat. Let me just read this real quick here. Yeah, so someone is talking about, using Unity's networking versus sort of writing your own and having much more granular control. Unity has the high-level API, which is what we're using here. It also has the low-level API, which gives you tons of control, though it is much more complex. And that being said, if you don't want to use Unity's, I said UI, or I mean networking there, you could roll up your own networking solution. That's much more complex, but you could certainly do that and have as much control as you really want. This is really aimed at using the high-level API stuff, though. All right, so these events here, that doesn't mean we're able to use them yet. This is just sort of the definition of them here. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a start method. So void start. And inside the start method, I'm going to go ahead and say, first off, I'm going to toggle my shared stuff. All right. So, or I'm sorry, I'm going to say enable player, which doesn't exist yet. Let me write that here. I'm getting ahead of myself. I always do that. So I'm going to do void disable player. So I'm going to have these two methods for turning the player stuff on and off, both remote and local. So disable player, enable player. There we go. Inside enable player, what we're going to do is we're going to say on toggle shared. So this is the things we're toggling for everybody. And I'm going to say on toggle shared dot invoke, and I'm going to pass in true. Okay. So this is where that dynamic value is coming from. We're no longer using the checkbox in the inspector. We're using it here. So I'm going to say true, and that's going to turn on anything that's shared that we tell it to. All right. And then I'm going to say, hey, if is local player. All right. Am I the local player? Now, this isn't going to work. It's going to turn red on me here. All right. And the reason is this, is that right now, my script, right, it doesn't really do anything networking specific yet. This is the first networking specific thing. It's like, what is a local player? I don't know what that means. All right. And the reason is this. So I am using the Unity Engine .networking library, but this should not be a mono behavior anymore. So since we're dealing with networking stuff, there's an object or a class that inherits from mono behavior that gives us all the extra networking bits, and that's called a network behavior. So now that I've defined this as a network behavior instead of a mono behavior, this is local player is now a known variable, and this will be true if I'm talking about my local version of me. It'll be false if I'm talking about a remote client version. All right, and so if this is the local player, I'm going to say on toggle local, okay, dot invoke, and I'll pass in true. Else, so this is not the local player, well then I'm going to toggle the remote stuff. All right, so the stuff that's shared between the two gets toggled on, and then we toggle the local stuff or we toggle the remote stuff. And this is going to be very similar for the disable player. It's just going to be the opposite. So it's all these things again, this time with false. All right, turn them on, turn them off. Nice and easy. And now inside start here, I'm going to call enable player. Just like that. And so now what we're going to do is we have our custom events. The client starts up and enables the player. That turns all these things on. And then we don't really disable them yet. That's going to come later when we can die and log on and off and all that stuff, right? So, so there's that. Okay, so this is our player script for now. Okay, and so I'm going to go back here to my editor here, Unity editor, and I am going to toggle some things on and off. So first off, on my player, I turned off the first-person controller, and I turned off the first-person character, this whole game object here, the camera and audio listener. I could have just turned off the camera, but then I'd also have to turn off the audio listener and all that stuff. So instead, I just disable the whole object, and that just prevents that from being a problem. And so in my local toggles, so here's the first-person controller, and then I also want to toggle this first-person character. Okay, and for this one, I'm going to do GameObject.setActive. Again, the dynamic variant of that. All right, so that's going to turn that on and off. Now, one thing they all share is they have this collider, and both locals and remotes should turn off that collider when they die or when they're enabled or whatever. That way, if I shoot a player and they die and they're waiting to respawn, I can't still run into their collider or shoot their collider, because that would be weird. And so I'm going to toggle shared this capsule collider. Okay, so everyone needs their capsule collider turned on and off. So enabled, and that's going to toggle that. I don't really have any remote toggles yet, so we'll get there in just a moment. Okay, and so I'm going to go ahead now, and I am going to build this and try it out. So Control B. And then once that builds there, I'm going to run it here. And all right, so let me run it here. Just slide it out of the way so we can see both. All right, so I'll host here, client here. All right, and so I have some odd behaviors, right, as we can see here. So it's still kind of doing something peculiar. If I look at my player here, I'm going to notice, where's my local one? Here's my local one. Something is just not quite working. We're having some issue. We don't really have any messages, so something's going on. So let's take a look. This gives me a good opportunity to show you something else that's cool, because this happens, right? If I look at my player clone here, actually, and now just remembered exactly why this isn't working. So if I look at my player clone here, one of the cool things is this network information down here shows me about this player. So if I look at this, I can see this is the client. Yes, it's also the server since I'm running it as a host here. It does have authority and it is a local player. So all of these things are true. If I look at the player object that's in the scene already, I can see it is a client, it is the server, it has authority, but it's not the local player. So that is local player will be false. And so I can use that to do some diagnostics and stuff like that. But here's the problem, and I always do this. This is my fault. On player, I made all these changes, right? Well, that's a prefab, and I never hit apply. I love it. Okay. And so now I do that every time. You'd think I'd learn, but I never learn. So I'm going to go ahead and build this again, and now it's going to work. I'm 100% sure of it. I should never say that. That's a terrible thing to say. So I'm going to host here, and there we go. All right, so I'm looking, I'm moving, and the other one is not moving, right? So that's cool. And let's see if it works this way too. So I'm going to go ahead and create a client. So I can see the client has appeared. And now the client is moving. The other ones are not moving. I can look around and all that stuff. However, again, I'm not seeing them move there. So this is normal. That's not a bug or anything. I know exactly. This time I know exactly why. And so we're going to fix that here in this next step. Another thing I want to point out real quick is the console is just going nuts. Right? Because I have two audio listeners. I've got this camera here, and I have the camera on my player, right? And we really don't want this to go nuts because we may miss errors, right? Like this one here. This is just the error that a person just timed out by leaving without like actively leaving the game. I just closed the window. And so I may have missed that error because I had all these messages. And so I'm going to quickly fix that. So the problem is that I have this main camera. It's got its audio listener. It's also really inefficient because this main camera is here, even though I can't see it because I have my player, right? Even though I can't see it, this is still rendering and doing all the normal camera stuff. And so what I want to do here is I want to go ahead and toggle this camera here based on the state of my player. So if my player's in the game, we turn the camera off. If the player's not in the game, we turn the camera on. Now I said toggle, which may make you think, hey, we're going to put that here. But since it's not really related specifically to this, and it's actually quite the opposite. When the player's on, I need that to be off and stuff like that. I can't really put it in here because I would need to write some super extra code to make the toggle an opposite toggle. And I really don't want to do that for just one item. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to show you some kind of clever timing. So I'm going to come back to my player script here, and I'm going to add a new variable at the top, which we'll call game object, and I'll just call this main camera. Okay, and what I'm going to do is inside the start method here, before I call enable player, I'm going to say main camera equals, and then camera.main.gameObject. All right, so this is going to find the main camera in my scene. Now I can do this right now. Actually, I'm going to come back to my scene, and I'm going to go back to my camera before I forget, and I'm going to set it back to main camera. There we go. I got all these extra ones from importing different projects, so don't worry about these. Main camera. And since the first person, right, the local player, hasn't toggled on their camera yet, this will find the main camera that's in my scene's main camera, right? And so then inside enable player, okay, I'm just going to say, hey, are you the local player? If you're the local player, then let's go ahead and say main camera, right, the one in my scene, setActive false. So if you've logged in, if you've been enabled as the local player, let's turn that camera off. And then on disable here, we're going to say, hey, again, are you the local player? Oh, you are? That's good to know. So let's go ahead and say main camera dot setActive and set that to true. Let's turn it back on. All right. And so now what we're going to do is when I hit play, we're going to see main camera there. I'm going to host. Main camera gets disabled. Okay. And so now if I were to die and the player were to get disabled, then that main camera would turn back on. And because of this, we're not rendering two cameras. One of them you can't see, which would be a total waste. But also, we're not getting all those messages and things like that. And so that's going to clean that up quite significantly. All right. Again, just reading chat here. Someone said, can you explain the difference between player authority and local player? So a local player is my player object, right? And so this one that's in the scene here, the one that was not spawned by the server and associated with my player, it's going to have authority because it's on the server, but it's not going to be the local player. So I'm going to see here on this player that was spawned, it is a client because if you're a host, you're a client and a server. So this is on a client. This is also on a server. This has authority because it's on a server, right? So it has authority. Server has all the authority here. It's a server authoritative model. And is this the local player? Yes. Now the other one, all right, it is the client because it is on a client. It is a server because it's on the server. It has authority because it's on the server. Is it a local player? No, because it's not associated with my network connection. All right, so it's not a local player. Now, I'll talk about how that plays into this local player authority here in just a second. Okay, so that's kind of the difference there. Hopefully that helped clarify. All right, and so now I've got that toggling on and off. And so now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to figure out why the player is only moving on one screen and not for everybody. Okay, and so the reason is this, is that I am synchronizing, their spawning. The server's spawning them across the network, but that's all I'm telling it to do. I haven't written any code that says, hey, tell everyone where I am. I haven't done anything like that. And so, someone said, are we going to get into commands and RPCs? Yes, we are. We're going to use them a lot. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell Unity to synchronize that data. And it used to be, back in the earlier networking days, earlier Photon and stuff like that, you had to write code and say, hey, transmit this and transmit that and all that. It's now just componentized, right? So I'm going to go add component, network, and then I'm going to say network transform. By the way, componentized is a word. Just throwing that out there, in case anyone's sitting there going, I'm going to get my dictionary, componentized. Okay, so first off, I'm going to say, what's my send rate? And everyone just wants to crank this to max. You really don't have to. 9 works great because the character's not super fast. And so we're going to interpolate any judder and stuff like that. And that's going to be fine. We really don't want to bog our network down too much, right? Bandwidth is the real key here, managing our bandwidth. And so I don't want to use any bandwidth that I don't have to. For the transform sync mode, I could sync nothing, which wouldn't be good unless I wanted to manually do it through code. I could sync just the transform. That's purely where the character is. And that's not great because that's just going to be little teleportation movements. I could do this if I'm not using a character controller or a rigid body, but since I am, I'm not going to sync the transform. I could sync rigid bodies. I don't have one right now. That would allow me to synchronize with forces and stuff. But since I have a character controller, I'm just going to synchronize that. And it's going to be automatically selected because I have a character controller. The movement threshold is how far it has to move before it updates on the network. So it's usually set to small. And the snap threshold is, okay, if the player updates and they're more than 5 units from where they were, don't try to interpolate them from one position. They just move them there. Because obviously we hit some lag or whatever, so that's going to cause them to jump. But it's better than them flying through walls or whatever else would happen. And the interpolate movement is how much is it going to smoothly interpolate from one point to another. Do know this, the lower you turn this down, the slower the player is going to seem to move. But the higher you turn this, the more rubber bandy and jittery the player is going to be because it's going to interpolate a lot faster. And so a value of 1 actually works really well here. It keeps them in the relative right position and doesn't rubber band or anything like that. So with the rotation, right, I could synchronize all 3 axes of rotation, but I actually can only turn on the y-axis, right? So why send all that data when I don't have to? Instead, I'm just going to choose, I don't know why it says top-down 2D, because it's just top-down 3D as well, but I'm going to choose just the y-axis. Now, the interpolation here of 1 degree is not fast enough, so I'm going to increase this to 15. That number is a magic number. I'm using it because I've tested this, and 15 worked well. All right, and so you can try other numbers, be my guest, but that's where that came from. All right, so 15. And so that's all I need to do, just synchronize my positions across the network. I'm going to hit apply. That's important. Don't forget that. And now I'm going to try this out. It's not going to work. Well, it's going to kind of work. And you'll see exactly what I mean here in a moment. So it's going to kind of work. But let's see what I'm talking about. So I've done a build. Okay, I'm going to start up a server here. And I'm going to host. Okay, and I'm going to move this out of the way. And I'm going to bring my client here. Okay. And it can sometimes be difficult. And you hear it kind of moving its feet so much. Trying to get it to where the client will be able to see the host while the host is moving. Okay, and so let me move over to the client, and I'm going to run in front of the client's field of view. This is kind of the hardest part, is always being in the right place. So I can see it is working now, right? It's moving, but the client's doing something weird, and you kind of hear the feet doing this thing, right, where it keeps landing. And if I try to move, I can't go anywhere, all right? Why can the server move, but the client cannot move? And the issue is with authority, okay? Our game has issues with authority. I can't help it. They're teenagers. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at this player game. And it's going to be trying to transmit its new position information. It's going to say, hey, server, I'm the client. This is where I am. And the server is going to say, wait a minute. I think you're over here. This is where I have you as. And so you're wrong, and you have to move back. And that's what's happening. The player keeps moving back. All right? And so that's a problem, because it's a server authoritative, right? The server is saying, no, this is where you are. My rules, my house, my battle arena, whatever, go back. And so what we need to do is we need to say, okay, the player, all right? The player on its network identity, the player is its own authority. The player is allowed to tell the server, hey, server, no, you're wrong. This is where I am. And the server will say, oh, allow me to update that. If I wanted this to work without giving the players any authority, I would have to have a script that says, server, I've pressed the up button. And the server would have to say, oh, well, then that's going to make your position here and transmit it back down. It's more data intensive. It's more secure. But really, we're going to kind of go halfway, right? So we could do, you're always trading security for data. So with this, it's not really a problem. I'm going to make this the local authority for itself. Players should be the local authority for themselves unless you're doing some very restrictive model for your network. And now the player will be allowed to move as well, which is good. And all is right with the world. Okay, so now I'll start a client here. And the client, you know what? I did it again. I did it again. I can almost say, oops, I did it again. I didn't hit apply. Every time. Every time. It's funny, I almost never forget when I'm home alone by myself, but when everyone's watching me, that's when I forget. But in case this ever happens to you, just know, don't be like Mike. Apply your changes. All right? Don't be a Mike. Okay. So now my client's going to move around, and now my client can, in fact, move around. And it's going to get all up in your face. Okay. So we get the point. All right. So movement's important there. Hello from Spain. Hello from Spain. Hello from Ohio. Okay. So there we go. So now our player is moving, and so now we have a slightly better multiplayer game. And now at least not everyone's fighting with each other for control and stuff like that, but it's still kind of boring. It's just these little white capsules flying around here. So let's give them guns, right? I'm an American. That sounds about right. And so let's give them guns. And so what I'm going to do here, it is Christmas themed, so my gun is going to be a candy cane. So I'm going to go into my Christmas assets. Again, these are from the asset store, FBX. And I am going to locate the candy cane, and I'm just going to drop that on the player. And I'm going to start positioning it. We'll do that, and then we'll do this. If you hold down Control, it moves by 90 or 15-degree increments, which makes it nice and easy to do 90-90. And momentarily, just for now, I'm going to turn on this first-person camera. I'm going to do this so that it's easier to position the gun. All right, so we'll do something like that. I'm also going to notice that there's like a visual cutoff here. So I'm going to go to my first-person character. I'm going to notice the near clipping plane is 0.3. I'm just going to drop that down to 0.01, and no more clipping there. All right, now I can turn that camera off. I really only needed it for positioning, and I'm not going to worry about the fact that the capsule is kind of in the way here because we're going to be fixing all that later. We're going to do a graphics overhaul to the player and do animations and all this stuff and all this really cool stuff. Death effects and UIs and whatever. It's going to be sweet. Okay. But there we go. So we've got this candy cane here. And you might also be thinking like, okay, why not put the candy cane underneath the first person character? Because if I hit apply and I hit play, I'll notice that for now, my gun doesn't move with my view. I mean, it does like left and right, but up and down, it does not, right? If I had placed the candy cane underneath the first-person character, then when I looked up and down, it would move up and down. The problem is that all of the remote players wouldn't have a candy cane then because this camera gets disabled, and so the children of it also get disabled. And since our remote players also need guns, you know, we can't really do that. We're actually going to use a much different solution. We're going to fix that. It's going to be pretty awesome here in a little bit. I'm going to have to go through and edit the video to get rid of all the coughs. All right. So now we have our candy cane there. And everyone in chat's like, hit apply, hit apply. Yes, indeed. So now I've got my candy cane here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, someone in chat is saying, searching for an easy way to authenticate a user with a login. You know, actually on the asset store, there's a lot of really cool stuff like WordPress plugins and things like that. Facebook has a cool API. There's quite a way to do that. Quite a few ways to do that. So anyway, one other question: can you teach us how to make a custom engine? I did that a long time ago. I made a C# engine called the Arc engine. I don't recommend it. It's really time consuming. That's why I now work for an engine company to say, use Unity. All right, so back to the task at hand. So I've got a candy cane here that's my gun. It has an animator on it. I don't really care about that. I can remove it. It's not going to matter. And so I also want my candy cane here. I'm going to have some shooting effects, and I've made some new ones. So I used the same ones the last couple years, but this year I have a new one here. The candy cane effects are optional, so you know they're not on the assets or anything. I just made them with the new particle system, and so I have a couple of them. I'm going to actually just kind of come out here into the ether here to show you them. So I've got this confetti hit, which is going to be just sort of when I shoot something, right? So we got that. And then I'm also have this, well, I've got lightning, which looks like that, a little bit of lightning there. Again, that's using the new trail renderers and noise modules of the particle system, new in Unity 5.5. And then I also have the confetti shot, which has the lightning as a child. It's going to shoot a little bit of confetti there. All right. And so those are the effects I'm going for. There's also an audio source on the confetti shot here. In the past, I used the Vuvuzela sound, and it was really, really annoying. So now I'm just using the Weapons Sci-Fi Gunfire, which is actually part of the stealth assets. So if you download those, they're free on the asset store there. You saw the link earlier. That's where that sound bit came from. So on my player here, under Candy Cane, I'm going to go ahead and just click and drag this confetti shot on there. And then I have to just move it into position here. So I have to fix the rotation since the candy cane has a bit of an odd rotation. So let me just fix that. No, I'm not trying to type in the rotation field. There we go. And I'll just rotate it so it's facing the way I want. There's the axis. I'm also going to pop myself in an isometric view and align myself with the axes here. That's going to line that up much simpler. There we go. That looks good. Okay. So I've got these effects here, and on this confetti shot. So again, it's just a particle system that's just spitting out some confetti with random colors and stuff like that. That's using just a confetti Christmas cutout texture or whatever. This was actually made by Rourke on one of our teams here, but not by me. But I don't know why I said it was that I made it. So I don't want to lie to you. I did make the lightning one. I didn't make that one. So sorry, Rourke. That was a slip of the tongue. I also have the shot effects manager here. This again, I'm going to give you all these scripts here. This isn't what I'm going to write right now because it has nothing to do with networking. All it does is it simplifies the process of showing these effects. So muzzle flash, audio, impact prefab. During initialize, it's going to instantiate a prefab for it. When I tell it to play shot effects, it's going to play the particle effects and the audio, and then when I tell it to play the impact effect, it's going to move the impact effect to that position and then play it, right? So nothing too extreme there, so I can leave that all. It's nothing networking specific, and it's already on there in this instance. And again, that's completely optional. You don't have to have shot effects, so you know, I'm not going to mention that too much or work with that too much. Okay, so that is the gun and the particle effects there. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my first-person character camera underneath the player, and I'm going to add a new empty game object to that, and I'm going to call it fire position. And the reason I need this is if I generate a shot at the camera's position, it's inside my collider, which effectively means I can shoot myself from the inside, and that's problematic. And so I'm going to take this fire position, and I'm just going to move it 0.5 units forward, so my shots originate about where my gun is, outside of my own collider, so I don't shoot myself, because that's kind of important. All right, and I'll hit apply. And so now I've got my fire position, I've got my gun with my particle effects there, and so now it's time to wrap it all up in a script to actually make it work. And so I'm going to go to my scripts folder here, and I'm going to say create C# script, player shooting. There we go. Player shooting. And so now that I've got that, let's just go ahead and open it up, and we're going to write some code in here. All right. Where is it? There, oh, it's just opening down here. Okay, so player shooting. So I'll go ahead and fix this here. I don't want this to be a mono behavior. I want this to be a network behavior. Let's see if I spell that right. It's going to turn red, so I'll right-click it, resolve Unity Engine Networking. There we go. I don't need those two libraries, so here we go. All right, and so this is going to manage all of the player stuff as far as shooting, and it's interesting because this is kind of a two-part script. It's containing information both for a non-server player and the server. And so this script is going to talk to itself across multiple machines. So if a remote player, a client, says, I'm shooting, it's going to talk to its version of itself on the server using a command that says, all right, allow me to shoot for you. And that way all of the important stuff is done on the server. We don't want to do any of the important shooting stuff on the client because that's a big security risk. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say serialize field and then float, helps if I spell it right, and I'm going to say shot cooldown. Okay, just because I don't want to be able to rapid fire, so I'm going to give myself almost a third of a second cooldown there. I'm also going to say serialize field, transform, fire position. This is where I'm going to generate my shot from. I don't want to generate a shot from the gun, all right, even though it looks like it should, and we're going to make it seem like it is. I want to generate from the middle of my screen where my reticule is going to be. So it's going to actually generate from the camera out as opposed to the tip of the gun, which could cause it to miss, even though you think you're aiming at what you're aiming at, right? And so actually I'm going to define a different position for the actual shot. And then I'm going to say serialize field, shot effects manager, which I'll call shot effects. Nope. Autocorrect. There we go. All right. I'm also going to say float elapsed time. This is going to be for keeping track of my shot cooldown, and bool can shoot, right? Because we don't always want to be able to shoot. Even if we're a local player, sometimes we're disabled for some reason. We can turn off can shoot, and then we cannot shoot. All right. And then I'm going to start with my methods here. So I'm going to say start, and I'm going to tell my shot effects, hey, initialize, right? That's going to cause it to create the impact effect. I'm just going to instantiate an object of that for us. And then I'm going to say, hey, am I a local player? If I am a local player, then can shoot is going to equal true. So I can shoot. If I'm not a local player, that doesn't happen, and I cannot shoot. So that's good. I don't want everyone else on my machine shooting for me, so that's important. I'm also going to say void update. So this is my local player's update, okay? Or this is everyone's update, local or otherwise. And I'm going to say if I cannot shoot, then I'm obviously not a local player, so just get out of here. Don't do anything if I can't shoot. Right? Update is where I'm going to check my inputs, my mouse, my keyboard, my inputs, the remote or the local inputs. And so then I'm going to say elapsed time plus equals time dot delta time, keeping track of our time here. And I'm going to say if input dot get button down, and I'm going to look for fire 1. That's my left mouse button, left control key, touching the screen. That's just kind of my BL end all input there. So if I've pressed fire 1, And so not only do I need to press fire 1, but my elapsed time needs to be greater than my shot cooldown. All right, so I have to have enough time pass between shots. That's important. All right, if that's the case, then I'm going to say elapsed time equals 0 again. All right, so reset it. So we start the time again. And then I'm going to have a command here. Now, I haven't written the command yet, so I'm just going to put a comment there for now. So the command, so this is all my client, right? Local player, right? This might also be the server if my local player is on the server, but this is not necessarily the server. This is just someone with a keyboard and mouse, a local player. And so they can't do the shooting themselves, all right? Because that wouldn't necessarily be secure. So we're going to use a command that says, hey, player 1 local, I'm trying to shoot. Hey, player 1 on the server, that version of me, go ahead and calculate this for me. And then the server will handle those calculations. So I'm going to create the command, all right? And so commands begin with capital C, lowercase m, lowercase d. That's just a requirement, right? So we know that they're commands. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a method for that. And so I'm going to say void, not void, void command, what did I call that? Fire shot. All right, and I'm going to do some other modifications in a second. But so it begins with CMD. That's a requirement. It's also required to have the command attribute. That says this is run on the server. All right, so now I can come down here where I commented that, and I can say command fire shot. All right, and so this is local player saying, hey, server, run this. This happens on the server. This has to be the server. It won't happen anywhere but the server, and that's important. And so we're going to tell it to fire a shot. And so it's going to create a raycast, and so I'm going to create a raycast hit called hit. And now I need to know where am I generating this raycast? What am I raycasting, right? I don't really want the player to be able to say, oh, no, I'm going to raycast, and that's what I hit, because we can't really trust the player, right? But we can have the player tell the server, okay, this is where I am, since I'm the authority. This is where I am, and this is where I'm facing. Go ahead and tell me if I hit anything. That's an okay way of doing this. So I'm going to modify command fire shot here, and I'm going to give it some parameters. So I'm going to have it read in a vector 3 for the origin of a shot, and a vector 3 for the direction of a shot. And inside my update here, I'm going to modify this to say fire position dot position, and then fire position dot forward. All right, so this is where the shot comes from, that fire position we created. This is what's forward. And so using that here, all right, origin and direction, inside our command, we could say, okay, that's where you are, that's where you're shooting. Let me generate a new ray. So ray equals new ray. And I'm going to say based on its origin and its direction. So that's going to give us our ray. Another thing I like to do, I think this is useful when testing, is I like to do debug.drawRay. All right, then I pass into this ray.origin and ray.direction. This is not necessary. This is just so I can see in the scene view. And I'll do times 3f. That'll make it, that's the length of it. And then I'll say color.red. I like to just do this in case, hey, my shots are missing. Why are they missing? Let me look in the editor and see. So it'll be a red ray that's on screen for 1 second. That just helps me to debug. I can turn that off or on. Doesn't really matter. So now I'm going to actually raycast. So I'm going to create a result called bool result equals physics.raycast. All right. Helps if I spell it right. Raycast. And then I'm going to pass into this raycast the ray that I just created and out hit, which will have the information that I want. And I've just arbitrarily picked 50 units as how far I can shoot. I really should have a variable at the top for that, but I don't know, I just didn't, and now I'm here, and so that's what it is. But that's just how far I can shoot, 50 units, which pretty much covers most of the level anyway. And then I'm going to say, all right, so if result, that means I hit something, okay? So my shot has hit something. So if my shot hits something, what do I want to do? And I'm going to comment this out for now, because I don't have a health script yet. So I don't know what I do if I hit something. I just know that I hit something. And we'll come back later and fill this in. All right? And then I'm also, so this is the server. The server says, okay, this happened. You shot. You may or may not have hit something. Regardless of whether or not you hit something, you need to process those effects. You need to play your muzzle flash and your audio and have the remotes do that as well. And so I don't want to do that just on the server because only the server will be able to see that stuff. I want all clients to do that. Oh, well, I want all clients of this player. So again, if I'm a machine 1, player 1 will do this. Machine 2's player 1 will do this. Machine 3's player 1 will do this, right? So it's not like player 1 will do it, player 2 will do it, player 3 will do it. All instances of this player will play their fire effects. That way I can see the other players shooting. I'll see the bullets come out of their gun. I will see the impact effect on the walls, things like that. And so for the client to tell the server to do something is called a command, right? For the server to tell all of the clients to do something, it's called an RPC. And so I'm going to go ahead and create a bracket, client RPC, and I'll say void. And just like commands, RPCs start with RPC, and I will call this process shot effects. There we go. And process shot effects is going to need 2 things. So first off, I need to know, did my shot hit something? So I'll say bool result. And if it does hit something, where did it hit? So I know where to put my impact effect. And so then I will also say vector 3, 3 point. All right. These are some of the longer scripts, which are why it's taking longer to write. The future ones are much shorter. All right. And so inside this process effect, so what do I do when I shoot? So I'll say shot effects. All right. And so first off, play shot effects. That's going to play the audio, and that's also going to play the muzzle flash. Now, if result, all right. So if I hit something, and I could call this result. I don't really like that name actually. So I'm going to say play impact. Should I play impact? I like that a lot better. It's much more descriptive. So if I should play impact, then I'm also going to say shot effects dot play impact effect. And where do I play that? At that point. And so now, back up in the command, now that I have this RPC, my command, I'm going to say, okay, I've shot. I may or may not have hit something, but I'm going to go ahead and call that RPC shot effects. And I'm going to pass in result. All right. And I'm also going to pass in hit.point. Now hit.point may be some nonsensical amount if I didn't hit anything, which is why I'm also using result. So that we'll only use this if the value is actually valid. All right. Now there's no health stuff yet, right? But this is going to get us in the right spot. It's going to get us to shooting, right? Which is always fun. And so back on my player here, I'm going to go ahead and add my player shooting script. Drop that right on there. I have my shot cooldown, and for fire position, all right, I'm just going to click and drag my fire position onto there, the one I created underneath the camera. And for shot effects, that's on my confetti shot prefab. There we go. And then for the player script, you might think, oh, I'm only going to toggle this for the local. Only the local should be able to shoot, right? But that's not true, because if I'm a local player but I'm not the server, I need the server version of me to shoot. And if the server version of me, which is not local, doesn't have this script, then it can't shoot for me, and I'm going to get an error. I'm going to get an error like I'm trying to call a command that doesn't exist. And so everyone needs the shooting script, right? So that's why it's going to be an untoggle shared. All right, everyone's going to need that. So I'll just drag my player on there. I'll grab my shooting script, and I'll say enabled. So everyone's going to have the shooting script or not have the shooting script, depending. Okay. That's an important distinction, because not all versions of me are on the server. Only one version of me is on the server. And so the script has to exist in all places, right? And so now I'm going to click apply, because only an idiot would forget to do that. I'm going to build, and then I'm going to run this. Now again, we can't shoot anyone else yet. I mean, we can, but it's not going to hurt them or anything. There's no health yet. But eventually we'll have that. So I'll have my client, my server, and I'll host, and I'll be a client. And now let me get to where my server can see me. Sort of can see me. It's got to look down a little bit. But so anyway, so I can shoot, and you can see my impact effect on the far end. Hopefully you can anyway, since I'm streaming this, you may not. So I can see where I'm shooting. Again, the gun isn't moving to where I'm looking. We'll fix that. That's going to come at a later point. Now let's go ahead and get the server. Server, walk in front of this guy. So I can see the server shooting as well. And if I look, I should be able to see the server's impact effects as well, right? Because even though the server is not local to my client, right, I'm using that RPC, and so I'm able to see it, right? So it's synced up across. Now, again, I can't see that I'm looking up and down and all that. That'll all be addressed. But it's a step in the right direction. So now we have our shooting. All right, so how am I doing on time? So I'm a little over, but I'm gonna keep going because I really want to get like the health bits done today, so we have like a complete game, and then we've got plenty of time to do the other stuff tomorrow. All right, and so that's the shooting bit. So now I want to work on the health, and so for my health, I'm gonna need to make first off some modifications to my player script. All right, since player is going to manage my entity on the network here, I'm going to add some new stuff. So first off, I'm going to come up to the top here, and I'm going to do serialize field, float, and then respawn time. How long does it take me to respawn once I've died? And I'm going to set that to 5 seconds. All right, and then I'm going to come down here at the bottom, and I'm going to make a couple methods that are going to be available to me. So I need a public method, public void, which is going to be called die. Die. Okay, so die, it's public because it's going to be called from the health script when the player's died. And the first thing it's going to do is it's going to disable the player. All right, disable the player. What it's also going to do is it's going to invoke a method called respawn, which doesn't exist yet, after our respawn time. So now let's create void respawn. Here we go. Void respawn. And when we respawn, first off, we're going to say enable player. Okay. But we're also going to say, hey, is this the local player? If it is the local player, let's pick a place to respawn at, right? Don't just respawn in the exact same spot because people can just spawn camp you then, right? And so let's pick somewhere new. I also need to say is local player because I don't have to. If I don't say is local player, when all instances restart, they're all going to spawn at different spawn points and then all snap to the position of the authoritative player. And that's going to make them appear and then disappear. It's going to look really stupid. So we're only going to move the local player, and that's going to tell all the other players where they're going. All right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say transform spawn. So, wow, that was way wrong. So I'm going to create a transform named spawn, and that's going to equal network manager. All right, dot singleton. All right, the singleton network manager there, dot get start position. And that's going to find a start position for me and give it back to me based off our spawn points. So it's going to look through our spawn points, give me one. All right, and then I'm going to say, hey, spawn dot position. All right, equals, or actually, you know what? No, that's wrong. I'm going to say transform dot position because I'm moving my local here, my player. Transform dot position equals spawn dot position. Had that backwards. There we go. And transform dot rotation is going to equal spawn dot rotation. There we go. So that's going to respawn our player there at some new position. Okay. So these just need to exist, and our next script is actually going to use it. So I'm going to come back here to my project view, right click create, C# script, and this one is going to be player health. So the player health script is going to handle what happens when we get shot, right? What do we do? And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to, oh, I need to open it, right? There we go. Here we go. Yeah, someone said, why is my mic always muting itself? It's so you don't hear me coughing. Sorry about that. It's probably much preferable to you hearing me coughing. And so I'm going to say network behavior. The hardest part about this little trick here is that you have to actually spell it right. Resolve Unity Engine Networking. I don't need any of that stuff. There we go. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to first off say serialize field. All right, and this is going to be my int max health. How much health do I have when I first start? And I'm going to set that to 3. I'm doing integers, 1 shot, 1 point. I mean, I could do floats for variable weapon damages and things like that, but I mean, ints are fine for now. I'm also going to need a reference to my player script, right? So I can tell it when I've died. And int health. So what is my current health? Now I'm going to say void awake. All right, now with network games, timing becomes very important. So start, all right, where we've used before, start happens once a player has spawned into a level, and so they know whether or not they're a local player. Awake happens before they spawn into the player, so even the local player doesn't know they're the local player yet. So just FYI, if you're doing something inside Awake and you're using is local player, it's going to be false every time. Because in Awake, it doesn't know yet. So anything that requires on knowing you're a local player or not, it's got to be in start. And so I'm going to say player equals get component. All right, and I'm going to find my player script there. There we go. Since I'm not doing anything with this local player, I'm just getting this component. I can do that in awake, which is fine. And then I'm going to say, okay, void on enable. This is a built-in Unity method. It'll be called whenever an object is enabled. I'm going to say health equals max health. So whenever I enable this script, I reset my health back to its max health. So if I die, I turn off the script, turn it back on, back to max health. Now here's the thing. I don't want the local players, I don't want the clients and stuff like that managing their health. Again, that's a security risk, right? It shouldn't happen there. Server authoritative. I should make the server handle that. So I could say is local player in here, or is server, right? So if is server. But here's a better way. So check this out. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to give this an attribute called server callback. What this does is it means this method can only run on the server. This code won't exist for anyone who's not the server. There you go. Nice and easy way, making sure this is always run only on the server and nowhere else. Now, I'm going to have another public method, public bool take damage. All right. I'm not going to pass it an amount because one shot's going to be 1 point here, but I could do that otherwise. And so now what I'm going to do, so take damage. Now take damage, again, it's going to be managing my health. And again, I really only want my health managed on the server. I don't want clients to be able to take damage on each other and stuff like that. It's not going to be good, right? There's going to be issues there. So I'm going to go ahead and put the attribute server on here, so only the server can run this method. If a client tries to run this method, it's just going to not do anything, and it's going to throw a warning out in my log, right, saying, no, I don't think so, right? So only the server is allowed to handle damaging, right? Which is good because player shooting, only the shooting is being handled on the server, and so player health, all the damage is being done, again, on the server. And so I'm going to start off by assuming that I have not died. Bool died equals false. Okay, and then I'm going to start looking. Okay, so I'm going to say if my health is already less or equal to 0, right? So I'm already dead, right? Then I'm just going to return died, which is going to be false because I'm already dead. Your shot did not kill me. That's what's important. We need to tell whoever shot us whether they killed us or not, so they can get points and do all that stuff, right? So I'm going to say, all right, I'm already dead, so no, you did not kill me. All right, it's like that game of dodgeball when you're out and you're walking the sidelines and everyone keeps hitting you with a frickin' ball and you have to put your hand up and be like, I'm out, stop hitting me. I'm already dead, so you don't get the points. So nana boo boo, yeah. All right, I love being able to say that as part of my job. So then I'm going to subtract from health there, and then I'm going to say, okay, died equals health is now less than or equal to 0. All right, so I reduce my health. Now, did I die? If this is true, died becomes true. Otherwise, it becomes false, or it stays false. All right, and then I'm going to return died. Okay, so now I return whether or not I died. Now, besides taking damage and letting whoever shot us know we took damage, all right, I also need to process effects. Like, do I flash on the screen? Do I reduce my amount of health in the UI? We don't have it yet, but we will. All right, and again, just like shooting, which said, okay, all clients process your shooting stuff. We're going to say, okay, for dying or taking damage at least, we need all clients to process that as well. So I'm going to create a client RPC, and I'm going to call this void RPC take damage. And I'm going to read in a bool, did I die? Because that's going to become important to me. So in here is where I'm going to handle any graphical things that happen when I take damage. It's also going to say, if I'm going to say is if died, then I'm going to say, hey player, or our player script, die. We died. It sucks. Now inside take damage, I'm just going to call that RPC take damage, and I will pass in died. There we go. Just like that. So when asked in chat, dead is false, you're returning false. Is that correct? I am that is correct. If I haven't died, then I haven't died yet. If I did die, I'm returning that back, and if I didn't die, I'm returning that back. So the player will just know whether or not they died or not. And then why is true-false logic hard for my brain sometimes? I don't know. Maybe you were dropped. I don't know. Sorry about that. But it can be a little confusing sometimes. It takes a little getting used to. Boolean logic, as they call it. So now that I have my player health script finished here, on my player shooting script, where I have health stuff, I can finally fix that there. So let me go ahead and fix that. So that becomes real simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say player health, since I now have that. Oop, I wasn't focused there. Player health All right, and then I'll just call that enemy, because that's the enemy I shot, equals, then hit.transform.getComponent. All right, and then we're going to look for a player health script on it. Okay, so we're going to say, I hit you. Give me your player health component. It may or may not have one. If I shot the wall, it's not going to have one, right? And so this is just an easy way to check. I'm going to say, okay, if enemy doesn't equal null, so they had a player health script on them, right? Then Yahtzee. Okay, so I'm going to say enemy, that's who we shot. Go ahead and take damage. Now I can say this because, again, this is the server. The server is telling the server to take damage. I'm not processing the true or false yet because I don't have any like score or anything like that. I'll add that code later. But for now, taking damage, I'm not using anything with the return value there. That's good enough. All right. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here into my game. I'm going to go to my player. I'm going to add the player health. So I'll do it this way. Add component, scripts, player health. There we go. There's nothing on here I really need to fix. And just like with player shooting, for my shared here, I am also going to need to toggle my health script. Right? So I'm going to drag player onto there. And I'm going to say player health and then enabled. Okay, so now I have player health. I've updated my player script. I'm going to click apply as super duper important. I'm going to hit, well, you know what? I don't want to hit play. I'm actually going to, since I don't have any other players to test against, we're going to fix that later. We're going to add bots. But for now, I'm just going to build this. And I'll hit play. And I'll move that to the side, bring this over here. Host, client. All right. So I don't have a reticule or anything yet, so it's going to be kind of hard to tell if I'm shooting anybody. But I'll just walk over here. 2, 3, and they're dead. Okay, and they're going to respawn somewhere. It's going to be one of two locations. Over there. All right, and so right now the player doesn't have any way of knowing they've been shot. We're going to handle graphical effects and stuff like that later, but they are getting shot. And so let me shoot the server. Hey, server, take that. All right, and so there you go. It's going to respawn. Chances are it'll be over here. No, I was wrong. Spawn camp. There we go. Okay, and so again, we're going to fix the graphical bits, but we now have players that can shoot, and then players that can be shot and die and respawn, all while maintaining this sort of secure chain of command to make sure we don't have any problems there. All right, so I am over on time. So we are definitely going to add more of the graphical stuff tomorrow, which is fine. This is actually what I wanted to get through today, so that's absolutely perfect on timing. So this is going to conclude day one, part one of Merry Fragmas. We have a complete, so to speak, multiplayer first-person shooter game. Graphically, it's right? And we're missing a lot of the functionality that I want, like our UIs and bots and animations and all that stuff. But it's a good day one. This is the foundation for how this stuff is going to work. And so the way the schedule is going to work now is day two, we're going to handle graphical stuff. So tomorrow, we're going to handle the UI. We're going to handle kind of how our scenes are organized. We're going to add some bots. We're going to deal with having actual meshes for the bodies. We're going to have like a soldier. We're going to do animations, gun angles, and things like that. And then on day three, we're going to add lobby and some of the more advanced gameplay features, like being able to choose your own name and your own color and how that's going to represent in the game and how we're going to go from there. And so, yeah, that's going to wrap up our first day of Merry Fragmas, Finish the Fight. And as always, I do want to say that if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you just want to yell at me for forgetting to hit apply or you're annoyed by all the coughing. Again, if you have any questions, comments, I'm going to keep putting this up in case anyone misses it. The Ant Ranch, Matt Mirrorfish, Will Goldstone, Mike Geig, which is me, Unity 3D. Definitely reach out to us. And otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow. And thanks again for watching. Cheers.